And we're here. Welcome to this afternoon's program. This is vk3sl test missions on 160 and on UHF. Need all the lead time I can get. So yes, I needed the full tune and some time before that. So I think with authority I can say if I'm going to continue with these programs, they will have to start sometime between 5 and 5:15. It's not always easy to start on the dot of 5. Too much happening. Anyhow, nothing to report. It's just all groundhog cyclic redundancy.
Cold outside.
It certainly is cold outside, Frank. It's freezing.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Well, you were in a nice warm studio last night by all account.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, and a lot of fun.
Okay. It would have been good to be somewhere productive.
Yeah, and it's a show I sort of was associated with a lot. And then, you know, in fact, it was the very last shoot that I did. The last day of work as an employee was on that show. So.
Okay, all right.
And so and also with that particular artist, been working with him for a long time. So it was kind of good to be back.
Oh, very good.
And a lot of fun. It airs tonight, so and it's
okay. Oh, very good.
Very political satire. It's very sharp. It's quite funny.
Yes. So one of the associates on that program I knew quite well through an earlier employment, and well, we can talk about that another time.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but that's all very good. No, look, it sounds like it's nice that they're inviting you back in. Do you remember all the traps? Do you remember what buttons to push and where to point?
Yes, it was all, that was all fine. As I said, it's like falling off a bike. You never forget how.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah, okay. So they haven't had any major system changes or...
Oh, no, and in fact, that place is the new studios there. I helped build it.
Oh, okay. So you're involved.
Involved in the design and the build, and when we originally moved in, it was all in SD.
Okay.
Because there was a little bit of hardware that wasn't purchased, which I found staggering given the price of the build. and it was literally for the sake of about $100,000 worth of hardware, prevented the place from running in full HD.
Oh, really?
With the internal systems router.
Okay.
And so we got it up and running in SD.
Yep.
Ran like that for about 3 or 4 months.
Mm.
And then over the Christmas kind of close down period, in inverted commas, we never really closed down there, but major productions do.
Yeah.
During that period of time, myself and about 4 other guys were involved then in the conversion over to HD.
Right.
And so spent the summer crawling all over the building, and between that and other things that I had on the go, because
Yep.
I saw that the workflow from the old studios didn't work in that place because of the redesign, so there were a few things I had to rejig and make work for us, which were big improvements in terms of the speed of getting things ready for shows.
Yes.
And then it's operated HD ever since. So basically that's all pretty much the same. And
well, I'm sure the powers that be were very happy to have HD because all the competitors are in HD, and
well, they were out putting it on the main channel, but it just meant that anything coming out of that place had to be up converted.
Right.
And yet all the gear, the cameras, the switching gear, the recording gear, everything was HD capable. It was just one of the links in the chain in the routing system that enables signals to go from anywhere to anywhere.
I see.
Wasn't capable of the full bandwidth at that point. So
really? But of course the bandwidth sort of multiplies in...
levels of 4, basically.
Yes, it's basically exponential.
SD to HD is roughly a 4-fold increase in bandwidth.
What
HD to 4K is 4-fold.
Yeah, 8K now.
Yeah, and 8K is defined, and they're already... NHK in Japan and various places are already playing with it and running it. I guarantee there will be 8K transmission out of the Tokyo Olympics.
Oh, goodness me.
That would have been set up by NHK.
Well, that would be beyond the realms of human perception, any difference.
That's right on the limit. 8K is, in fact, the limit of human eyesight.
Okay.
So if you've got a fully calibrated display and you're looking at it, at the appropriate distance, that's the limit of resolution of the human eye. We can't see any better than that.
Wow. So we just need holographic 8K. Then
they'll still develop it. I'm sure you'll see, down the track you'll see 16K and beyond.
Yes.
But the reality is, do we need it?
Yeah.
Entertainment, no, but for other purposes, well, okay, as imaging gets better, it just means you've got more resolution to play with.
Yes, of course. Interesting.
It's the same now for people shooting HD.
Yes.
You can shoot stuff on a 4K camera and not shoot at HD, and people say, why would you bother? Because what it enables, particularly, say, for instance, in a post-production sense, particularly, let's say, if you're shooting, like cinema verite or something, and things are jiggling around a lot, well, what it means is in post you can actually de-jitter it by basically taking a HD slice out of the 4K image and stabilising that bit and burning some of the image to achieve it. So there are lots of reasons why they shoot in higher reso.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I've noticed some of these amazing algorithms for improving blurry photographs or low-res pictures, bringing them up to into sharp relief. It's extraordinary.
The technology's come along leaps and bounds, and even look at the deep fake stuff that's now occurring. It's been reported on recently. It's now in the realm that somebody with a decent home computer system can do this stuff. Yeah. Once upon a time, that was the realm of major league supercomputers and clusters, and so when they read an article in American Cinematographer for the render cluster at Industrial Light and Magic, which at that stage was something like each rack unit was like a 19-inch rack unit with 2 CPUs in it. Each CPU was, I think, 1.5 gigahertz at that stage with about 8 gig of RAM. So there were 2 units of those in each rack. Yep. That render cluster was 1,500 of those units slaved together, and then they were coming in to do it was one of those Marvel films, The Hulk, and when they realised how much CGI they needed to render for The Hulk, they had to double the number of processing units.
It's staggering, isn't it?
And it still had the ability, too, that when the office staff went home at night, they'd leave their computers in a form of sleep mode, and the rendering software that was a Linux render cluster could pull up all of the desktop computers to add to the power as well.
Oh, goodness me.
The kind of computing power they're using to process, those big film CGI things. It's just astonishing amount of power.
So do they have huge... I mean, I gather they do have fairly large teams working on these
They
CGI.
do. I look at the credits on some of these movies.
I know.
Yeah, the number of compositing artists and rotoscoping artists and all that sort of stuff, matte painting and, extraordinary big teams because they still physically have to do aspects, but a lot of it, though, once they get to a point, is that has to be recreated at the full resolution or at, frame by frame and joined and, rendered into smooth motion.
So I suppose a lot of it is just the interpolating and just continuity
and
aspects.
So once you've set up the framework, that's the bit that a lot of the artists do, setting up the framework and the detail and inputting, be it colour information for particular fields or textures or whatever it is, and then you basically said, right, now go and render that scene, and that might have to sit there all night, chugging away to spit it all out and turn it into an image that looks like something to the eye. So.
Oh, well, we're moving beyond silicon. We'll have organic computers soon, which will just do it in a fraction.
So it's all,
It's fascinating.
It's an amazing field.
It is.
But the power that's become available to you and I just at a reasonable level home.
That's it. Well, that's where it becomes a little bit worrisome, I suppose, in terms of national securities and things like that.
Well, that's what they are
fakery.
worried about, that recent deep fake that guy put up of using, rendering essentially like Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
And everyone was even, they had AI looking at it, and there were certain aspects of AI that were fooled by it.
Wow,
so
that's staggering.
That's fairly... I think that's sort of scared a few people.
Yes. Oh, it was necessary. I think it'll. Our national security experts will all be looking very closely at that one.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Oh, hello, Frank. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Just listening with great interest here.
Okay, yeah, it's a really interesting topic.
G'day, Frank.
Yay. So, yes, now we'll go beyond seeing all the puppet strings and the Thunderbirds. I have to say, I was a bit disappointed watching the Thunderbirds yesterday because I could see the strings.
The marionation. In fact, it gets there's a little tip the hat to that in tonight's episode, a reference.
Is there?
A little graphic you'll
really?
see if you watch it. Yeah.
Okay, I might have to time shift. But, okay.
Well, it's available on iView.
Yeah,
once it's gone away,
Oh, very good. Yay.
Yeah, it's... He's very aware of cinema and all of that stuff. He's a study of all that stuff. So any opportunity to squeeze something like that in. The set's full of little references too, you'll see.
Oh, very good. Well, it'll be interesting to...
notice the logo that's on some of the chairs.
So can we know which camera you're behind?
Yeah, I do, yeah. Well, you could work it out from that shot I sent you.
Yes, that's true. You probably could. I could, yes. Right stage.
Camera right.
The camera right, yeah. So, very good.
But it's a tightly scripted show, like it's very...
Yeah.
Hence the rehearsal process, because everything, it's very quick for the graphics runs and the little inserts and stuff, so it requires some rehearsal for everybody to be on the same page.
Do they rehearse the sort of the comedy stuff and the sort of... do they do a bit of stage, what do they call it, improvisation stuff just to sort of warm up? And
look, they kind of do. I mean, the cast have a read-through in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And now they've had scripts for a while and they've shot location stuff during the week.
Yeah.
And generally in the studio they have a half day on the Monday as well for a little bit of pre-prod or, pre-production to maybe scenes they want to produce in the studio set.
Yeah.
Just to give them a bit more material.
Because they need to sort of practice alternatives and things like that.
Oh, they do, and they overshoot on the night dramatically.
Right.
For what is essentially a half-hour program, we're probably shooting close to an hour worth of material.
Wow.
And the clever thing too is, if you notice, that right through the different series, it's only the later series where it's changed a tiny bit. Sean always wears the same wardrobe.
Okay.
Same wardrobe, same haircut,
Yep.
same. So that can be material inserted from 3 years ago.
Okay, very clever.
And in fact...
His shade of grey might have changed a bit, but...
Yeah, exactly. And some of the material we did last night was in fact a reworking of some stuff from last week that they had to refresh because of the lockdown and now no audience.
Okay.
So we just had to reshoot some intros and outros and bits and pieces that related to it to make that stuff work that was carried over. So
yes. Do you notice a difference when there's no audience there?
Oh, it's feels weird. Well, that's the first time I've done it last night. And then, in fact, Sean and I had a chat afterwards. He said, how does that feel? I said, yeah, it's very strange. I'm sure you've done, a season and a half like this.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the first time I've done it. It's very weird. He said, yeah. He said, it took us a while to get used to.
I imagine it would, because you just, to some degree, you'd be bouncing off the audience. Do they do the people on the floor give some reference? Do they give them some visual, or do they laugh or thumbs up? Or
They'll let them. They just let them react as they do, and Sean, being a producer, of course, as well, gauges that on the night as to how people react and what they react to.
Right.
And he takes notes and makes mental notes that okay, that worked, that didn't.
Yes.
And so the show gets cut and tightened accordingly.
Yeah,
so
very interesting. So he sits there on the cutting room floor and spends the...
Yeah, so once we finish shooting, he leaves. He probably goes off and has a quick bite to eat or something and clears his head, and then he literally goes and sits in the edit with the guys, and they start to build. I mean, we do this show in 3 or 4 segments over the course of the record, and what they do is when we finish a segment, because it's all recorded at a system called EVS that's kind of locally controlled in the studio. Yeah. Once that first section is done, because they try to get it so you've got all the transitions and the top and tails all like a studio bulletin, so it's essentially there. They then do what's basically called push that through. It gets pushed through to the edit suite. Okay. Which on the backbone, which is fibre optic, very high speed. And then, so that chunk of the show's already through, and so then while we're recording chunk 2, they're already editing chunk 1.
Wow, that's tight. Well,
because
I suppose it has to be
turned around in, sort of under 24 hours, because it has to be finished by whatever time today, so that legal can look at it. Oh. Because, of course, it pushes boundaries. Okay. And the legal team need to cast their.
So what happens if they? I suppose you have to be ready.
If they throw it back, then they have to do an alternative cut or replace. Yeah.
Okay, so they've got to have contingencies. But I suppose
we watched that show all the time, and it made a huge difference. First time we saw it with no audience.
Yeah, it was weird, wasn't it, Frank?
Totally weird, and even from an audio point of view, to hear no laughter, and it seemed to affect the timing of it too. The laughter gave it a sort of a pacing that it lacked when no one was laughing, no one was there.
Absolutely, very true. Because the performers modify their timing based on the reaction. If they're getting a big reaction, they'll delay their line, or because they know that the way a lot of that comedy works and is written is that it's a build.
You've got to deliver on the crest of the wave.
Yeah, it's a little gag followed by a little bit of an escalation, followed by another one to the real, the kicker. And they're well aware of that, and so they pace themselves and their delivery, and they're very careful that they reacted to that bit a little bit bigger than I would have thought. I'm just going to delay my next line, because if they miss that little bit of a setup in the next line, then we could blow the actual gag. So they're very mindful of that. And in fact, there was one point last night where Sean and another performer were doing one thing, and during the rehearsals, the other performer was just pushing it through a little quickly. And they talked about that. They said that's because you're, again, without the audience here and that whole reactive thing, we've got used to now this. You tend to pace it up a bit. He said, just go back to the way you did it in the read-through. He said, it'll work a lot better. So it's interesting to see the experience of, them too being well aware of that and checking each other, other performers will say to Sean, and he's a producer, that line there, and you go, he's very mindful of his own performance. He's very good, but, he takes constructive criticism really well, and he even welcomes input from crew and others. Like if we see things or hear something, you'll mention it. He goes, "Oh, good point." Okay. So it's an interesting process.
Fascinating process. It's very much it's a communal thing, isn't it? I mean, you all work in it together. Yeah. And
it's the old story, You put up 100 or 1,000 ideas. You don't care if 99 or 999 get knocked back. For the one that gets through and just lifts the gag a bit and makes it better, it's worth it. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, for sure. No, fascinating. Oh, you've got me inspired. I've never really, I think I might have watched it years ago. But
legal people would have to listen fairly carefully.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they do. And the good thing is that they generally, I don't think they have to do too much for that show because of the fact that Sean's background. He's a lawyer. He was, I think, studied or read law in South Oz, and I think he was corporate law and came across, but before he got into writing for television. But so he's got a background, so he's well aware of, most of the do's and don'ts.
Yeah, that was one of the things that always interested me about him. I knew he'd been a corporate lawyer. You don't get too many corporate lawyers quitting it to become comedians.
Yeah, well, more than you think now, because there's another one in the stable too, is Charlie Pickering.
Oh, was he a lawyer?
Yeah. So, again, and very different style, but that same, very aware of what he's writing, and again realises, there's even times on set where they're doing something and someone proposes a change of and he has a thing. He goes, don't think so. I think we're going into a real grey area with that or whatever. So he's quite aware too.
Yeah, I called him a comedian. That far underrates him. He's a great writer and comedian, isn't he?
Yeah, very much. So yeah, it's an interesting process, and they're very different shows, but both good fun.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. It's great to get these sort of insight and impressions, because you wonder about the whole machination of how these things transpire, and there must be a lot of redundancy in the material, but they've got to keep their pace, they've got to keep sharp, they've got to keep on their enthusiasm and energy.
Like I noticed that historically, the first few record nights, a season of 10 or 13 eps or whatever it is, first 3, 4, 5 record nights, the rundown and the shooting schedule for the studio would be huge. Look at the amount we're shooting tonight, and then you get to the back end of the season in the last 3 or 4 eps, and all of a sudden the rundown's like half the thickness because they've banked so much material. Yeah. That we really don't need to shoot as long as we've got the topical stuff that we need for the week to work. We've got all the other stuff there, and there would still be a huge stockpile of material that hasn't aired yet from this season and previous. And
wow, that's fascinating. Yeah. So I mean, you could almost do. I'm sure this has been done, but you could almost have the same program with a very different emphasis. You could sort of cut and paste and
cuts.
recombine. I suppose that does happen sometimes in historical stuff. You certainly get the editor's cut on a lot of movies on the DVD. But quite fascinating. Well, I hope you have to give us more inside stories. This is the place to hear it.
Well, it's funny that it's also fun, and happened last night a few times when the actors are, you can see they're working hard to try to make the other one lose it.
Oh, okay.
And there's a couple of situations last night where that happened.
Yeah.
It was extremely funny. There's a few gags that hit the entire crew and cast every time the line was
I was just going to say, do you ever get into a position where no one can they just have to cut it because it's just people crack up all the time?
Yeah, it happens a number of times. It's happened on this show a few times. Generally by the record you've got it sorted, but
but sometimes it must be hard to keep a straight face if you've practiced something 20 times.
Happened to us on the big gig a few times and then you're live to air.
Yeah.
And certain certain people like Patrick Cook and others would just ham it up and know that they've got you. And between he and Glenn Nicholas and certain others, they go off on tangents and everybody's losing it.
Yeah, brilliant.
And then even another time it was on Kath and Kim. Yeah. There was a time we were doing a scene in the bedroom of the house down there in Patterson Lakes, the location. It was Magda, Jane and Gina in a scene upstairs, the three of them. Yeah. And there was one word in the script, and it was an innocuous word. Nobody paid attention, but there was something about it. And because these three women have worked together so much, they know each other so well. We got to that one word and they would just all lose their crap.
Oh, my God.
Literally, you could see Magda doing that,
tightening up.
Chewing her lip, trying not to, and then she had to say the line. The moment she did, she went, or Jane went, or Gina went.
Oh, is that funny?
And we got to, I think it was 27 takes, and Ted Emery, the director, said, right, that's it. So I have to put up with these women, right? Everybody out, go on, have a coffee break. You three, off. different directions.
Yes,
And he literally called a half-hour break because he knew we could have plugged away for another hour and not got it. He knew he just had to break the cycle and get him out of it. And and then we came back and after a break and it was all good. But it was and it got to the point it was infectious. Then initially it was just them, and then it became it
becomes a meme, doesn't it?
Even the director and the DA and everyone by the end, we were just all losing it.
Well, it becomes a part of the culture. It becomes a meme.
Incredible how infectious that sort of thing is.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I know there are certain little trigger stories that my sister and I have, and members of the family have here that just break everyone up, and we lose it every time.
Same here too.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to have. But it's great to hear it about that level of camaraderie. Amazing. Did you ever do Spicks and Specks?
Yeah, I was involved in the development of it, and
really?
right through to all the seasons of the original while it was there, the two with the different cast that they had when they tried to redo it with Josh and the others.
Okay.
And I've done one. I did the series of specials for last year.
Did you?
The run that's just going to air now, I didn't do because that was recorded during lockdown last year.
Yep, sure.
And they were being very tight on crew and just. But done most of it. And the early days when we first started, when we had a crane on the show, and it didn't last very long because it really wasn't the sort of show for it.
No.
In development with Adam in the early days and stuff.
Very good.
It was a favourite show to do. Loved it.
That's one of the few free-to-air TV programs that I did watch.
Because the music on it was fabulous.
Oh, it was.
Some of those little acts that they'd get in,
they'd get some
play,
brilliant stuff in.
Look what they've done to my song.
That's it.
There were some extraordinary acts that came in to do that.
Yeah, I know. It was better
Absolutely.
than...
I always wished that, you could hear more of them and trace their own bands to hear them doing other stuff.
Yeah, it's like Red
Well, I
Faces
often
and
wish
steroids.
that we would have taken the time out. I mean, the schedule was tight because the way that was shot historically, we would do it every 2 weeks. We would have records, and we would do 2 nights in the week. We'd do a Tuesday night and a Thursday night. We'd do 2 eps each night. So essentially, we were shooting 4 eps a fortnight, and that's how we got the season in. Sort of bag or 26 eps or whatever they were,
Wow.
And so they're big schedules, they're big nights. They're doing 2 eps, doing it back to back. So change of audience, change of cast.
So how would they change audiences within that?
Yeah, sometimes, sometimes not, but for the bigger records they certainly did. And I think the longest night we had was. I think we ended up having one record night went something like 6 hours.
Wow.
But that was a monster. It was really complex and a lot in it. And it was that thing too that Anthony, the main producer, he was happy to let, particularly when you got certain artists come in, sometimes it would just develop a life of its own. And he would let it go because he knew, look, this material's all gold. He said, I just have no idea what I'm going to use yet. Let's just get it all... And then I can worry about fixing it in the cutting room.
I always got a sense that it was almost an impossible program to condense.
The cut, sometimes the edit really looked like it had a cleaver through it.
It really did look like that, and I lamented that. I would have thought, wow, wouldn't it have been great just to open it up and
to go for an hour instead or something.
Exactly.
I always wished that if the schedule had have allowed for that with a lot of those bands, that we could have done extra record of a bit of their material and stuff.
Totally.
And banked that for then, and then just run like a parallel special at the end of the year of, the Lookma outtakes or something, with a whole bunch of that stuff. Cause,
that would have been brilliant. I would have loved that.
Some extraordinary outfits that came into play, and and people most unlikely, and even like that Discovery, I think he's passed away now, but the one that always cracked us up was Barry Morgan and his organs, with the Hammond organs.
Yes.
He was fabulous. Tons of fun.
Yeah,
He absolutely was.
And
they had a terrific Indian group on the other day. They're absolutely amazing.
Yeah, okay. I haven't watched the latest series. Apparently everyone's looking older.
They'll be on. It'll all be on iView. It'll be there because the current stuff, they'll hold it for a while. It won't stay there forever, but it'll be there for a while, and then of course it'll get thrown into the endless replay mix with the others, I guess. Yeah,
I expect it will. But that was a great success story. That program, it did a lot for giving, as you say. incidental musicians, gave them an outlet, and there was a lot of talent. Well, it was sort of that whole concept was heralded by Red Faces back in the 70s, really, wasn't it? And then
similar.
Well, it's the same as the amateur hour programs and things like that.
And it was one of the music producers in the later series. We had quite a few over the time, but one earlier days was Jane Rainey, who was she was a music producer contact that worked with us on Recovery.
Okay.
Back to the rock music show back in the 90s that I worked on.
Right.
So, and various people like that, but in later seasons, I think still involved with it is Dan Warner.
Okay.
Dan's a musician playing around town now, plays gigs with other people and releases albums and stuff. So, very musically knowledgeable people that are in the scene and involved in it, and so they go out and, obviously they know a lot of, as you do, all these musicians that you've played with and that and they use those contacts to find and they'll be having a dinner conversation or something. Oh, we check out this act, we saw this, blah, blah, blah. And it's that sort of thing,
Yes, of course.
So
I know people who got up and played on the program on Spicks and Specks, and there's a lot of cross-pollination for sure. And the great thing is it sort of promotes fusion and homage to different styles. It's the whole sort of concept of that type of thing is really good for breaking down sort of...
and I think it also opened audiences up to stuff that they perhaps never have considered,
that's
when
right.
artists come in. And examples of certain artists that come in. I remember there's one show we did where Martha Wainwright came in. She was a guest on the panel.
Yeah.
And now I know of her. I've not been a person that's listened to her music, but I'm well aware of the Wainwright family. Rufus and the whole, they're all incredibly talented musicians.
Yeah.
And then she did Substitute, or where it gets up and sings the lyrics out of a book. And you should have heard it. Her voice was spectacular, and she just how talented a singer she was. Like the melodies were perfect.
Oh wow!
And voice like a bell.
Yeah.
And you could have heard a pin drop in the room.
Oh, how about
And there's certain people like that, and there's been others, but she was certainly
yes.
one that really stands out.
Oh,
that I
very
just went, wow, listen to that.
Oh, tremendous!
She's an amazing singer. Both her mother and her father are extremely talented musos, as you'd possibly know.
Yeah.
You would know.
Okay.
Yeah, and another one was, and who I've got a couple of the albums, Beth Hart. Young American singer.
Yeah.
And when you first hear her, you would swear this is a black American soul singer. That kind of timbre to the voice and the whole. And then you see her, and she's a little white woman.
Okay.
And she has got the hugest pipes. And again, similar. And she's done a couple of albums with an American rock blues guitarist called Joe Bonamassa. And they've done some covers, like they do a version, and on the first album they did together, they did a cover of Nutbush City Limits and a whole bunch of other stuff. And you just think, listen to the voice on her. And you, if she walked past you in the street, you'd never pick it, sort of thing. She's this small woman who just, very, most unlikely.
Yeah, someone you wouldn't picture having a
and I've seen her
presence.
live with Jeff Beck once, and at the concert hall here, and you go, listen to that.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, it's it. Well, it gives these people a chance to develop a profile. It's good. Well, we'll have to pick up on Spicks and Specks now, folks. I'm afraid I'm happy to leave the channel open and listen inside, but I'm on dinner duty.
Play some music.
I've enjoyed this. It's been really interesting. Really quite.
Another Thunderbird?
Do you know what? I got the worst slap on the wrist I've ever got.
Why?
For playing Thunderbirds. The YouTube gave me a strike.
Oh, no.
And if I get 3 strikes, my channel gets cut off within 90 days. So I'm sort of... and usually it sort of just gives you a copyright notice and says you can't monetize this, and that's fair enough. I'm never in the wildest dreams ever going to monetize anything. And so that's...
Wow, but it picked up on Thunderbirds.
It picked up on Thunderbirds and gave me a really... I got a couple of letters, and I said it went to a review panel.
You don't do it anymore.
So I can't. The risk is too high. Now, that's never happened unless they've got a new algorithm that's going to do this with other things, in which case I'm thinking that it may be worthwhile putting up another...
I'm just wondering, though, is it because maybe one of the big production houses has recently redone the rights to it or
Yeah,
something.
look, I think so.
Because of
Wayne
all the
alluded
new
to that.
streaming services, because I notice I'm seeing some ads now that Paramount Plus is about to launch their streaming service in mid-August.
Right.
So,
Look, it could well have
now
something
what
to do
you're
with
getting
it.
is the big movie houses,
Yeah.
not just say a Netflix or a Amazon or whatever. Now they're also, and they're super hungry for content, and so they're probably relicensing a lot.
I'd say that's the case.
I think
That's a high-stakes problem.
Thunderbirds are the, what can I say, the most well-known of any of the things that you've played, you know, in that sort of way.
Yes, I know what you're saying, but doesn't it work well on radio?
Oh, it's terrific. Well, I loved it, of course.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I know that the marionation is fantastic, obviously.
Yeah, but it works. It holds up.
It doesn't even need it.
But yesterday I wasn't looking, and I thoroughly enjoyed the orchestral score, and all the way through I was listening to Barry Gray's wonderful writing, and the music carries it, and it's a great piece of radio theatre. So
It just works, doesn't it?
it does. Now, what I could do is I can put them up, but I have to make sure I turn off my stream first. So that's always a possibility. So I can find a way around it, but I just got to be ever so careful because if this happens more than once. But I'm thinking as a contingency, well, if I put it this way, if I get a strike again. And I've never had one, and I put up literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of recordings over the last 3 years since I've been doing this, and including a lot of contemporary stuff. And I've never had a strike ever. It's always been just that usual thing: you can't monetize. Fair enough, and I think it's an agreed situation that you are just doing something for the public good, and that they usually have their sort of bit of saber rattling, but I think it's a gentleman's agreement of sorts. And but this is a different thing altogether, and I'm thinking maybe I should set up a different archive channel, just in case just in case there's a new algorithm or a new level of acuity. I don't know. So I don't want to lose my archive because there's basically the entire lockdown. All the programs are there.
Yeah, can you?
And
have you got local copies of it all?
Yeah, I do, but it would be in some. I would never have time to put it all up. It just would be. I just never have that time to do it. So not that it really matters, but it's there. And I'm sort of happy that it's got a holding place outside the house. So I'll just watch carefully. And if I get another one of these sort of serious ones, I've got 3 strikes, I'll underscore the channel and then just put up a note saying, look, I'm moving, I'll create another channel and try and preserve things that way. But
just don't take any risks,
no.
sort of on my urging.
No.
What this has done is to generate an idea, or to move ahead an idea that my son and I have had for some time, to run a Thunderbirds festival here.
Oh, wow.
And we can play them all.
Oh, gee, I'd be in that. Oh,
You have to come over.
yeah. Oh, yeah, invite me. I'd love to have an
that'd be
excuse to watch them
Too
again.
much fun. I have gone to a fancy dress party in a Thunderbirds costume, which I grabbed from work, which was used in a scene that I worked on for the D-Gen, which was the rip-off for that years ago.
Right, very good.
Tons of fun.
So who did you go
It
as?
must have been hilarious.
Yeah, I love the episode last night because someone swallowed the transmitter, the little micro transmitter.
Right, he ate the transmitter.
Yes. No, it ended up being Jeff. Jeff ate the transmitter with his dinner.
Blamed his kids.
Yeah, blamed his kids, sent them all to their rooms. I like those sort of candid moments. But it was such a good episode because it's the one where the spaceship, the Mars probe, falls off the Brooklyn Bridge, or that's like the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. It did a big wobbly and fell into the sea, into the drink. And then they had to separate the craft so that it didn't explode. It was very clever.
They're all clever.
They're great plots, fabulous. So yeah, look, we'll find a way. I just have to make sure I push the stop button on the stream. But maybe I can put a few on towards the end of the program, so they can be there, because I think it's good fodder for sure.
Maybe we have to develop our own parody series called The Blunderbirds or something.
Yes, well that's
I like it.
that fits the bill.
Too good a title not to be used somewhere.
That can be my pseudonym. Yeah, that certainly would be a good thing. Yay. Well, anyhow, look, as things go, I should be back. We'll keep keep these meandering along. I'll put on some recorded material. In fact, I'm going to put on an LP a little bit later while I'm doing dinner. And this is, I had some sad news yesterday, and I won't dwell on this, but my uncle died yesterday, and he was in his 90s, but he was one of the people who really got me interested in classical music. And he used to dutifully go down to Thomas's record with Mr. Cargo and buy his LP every week in the 60s or 50s. And he had a lovely LP collection, and he had a beautiful quad stereo system, and he was really a very important influence. And I had a lot to do with him. I used to go down, he ran a nursery in his later years in Merricks, and I used to go all my uni holidays. I'd go down and work at the nursery, and I'd bring my cello. And I had a really close association with this side of the family. He's probably my closest uncle. Anyhow, he was getting
Sounds
on.
like you need to play one of his favourite pieces.
Yes, I am. I'm going to play a record that he got from the Avant-Garde label. And this record, he told me, was brought in by Mr. Karga on his request. And a few years ago, he said to me, can you please dub this off? He's never heard it anywhere. And he had the story of it being accessed by John Karga in the 60s. And I thought, well, I've got the record here and I'll put it on. So we'll wind up with that little dedication to my uncle Colin Anderson. So we'll hear that after. I'll put a bit of polyfiller on first while I get things queued up. And yeah, we'll finish with that tonight, and then we should be back tomorrow, all being well. So
I had to call. Condolences, Steve.
Oh yeah, but look, he had a very good life, and he was living at home until about 5 days before he died. And that's the thing that anyone could wish for, really, is to be not to have a lengthy time in an institution or hospital. So yeah, he's
That's
lucky.
the way you want it to be.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll sign.
Okay.
Wish you both good evening. VK3JR clear.
Yeah, all the very best, Frank.
VK3JR Group, VK3OP.
Yeah, thank you, Frank OP, as well. And look, it's been great to chat. Always enjoy this, and we'll have some an in between something. This is just a record out of the pile. It's one that'll be known to most people, and I'm testing out a new system with the turntables as well. I put some rubbery new on the idler wheels, which should mean I get a faster start. vk3sl.
Partner, it's my day. Bend an ear and listen to my version of a really solid Tennessee excursion. Pardon me, boy, is that the Chattanooga Choo-Choo? Yes, yes, track 29. Boy, you can give me a shine. Can you afford to board Chattanooga Choo-Choo? I got my fare and just a trifle to spare. You leave the Pennsylvania station about 3:45. Read a magazine and then you're in Baltimore. Dinner in the diner, nothing could be finer than to have your ham and eggs in Carolina. When you hear the whistle blowing 8 to the bar, then you know that Tennessee is not very far. Shovel all the coal in, gotta keep it rolling. Ooh, ooh, Chattanooga, there you are. There's gonna be a certain party at the station. I used to call Funny Face. She's gonna cry until I tell her that I'll never roam. So Chattanooga choo-choo, won't you choo-choo me home? Chattanooga, Chattanooga, get aboard. Chattanooga, Chattanooga, all aboard. Chattanooga, Chattanooga. Won't you choo-choo me home?
That's what happens when you play one record with the same steel needle for 20 years. Concurrent. Totally wrecked. But there we go. It was the famous Glenn Miller Orchestra. This is vk3sl Test Missions on 160 and UHF. And, as I said before, we will now play the record that belonged to my uncle, who passed away yesterday. And it is a recording of the music of Susmeier. It's a cantata. It's a cantata called Grandfather's Birthday Celebration, and it's with children's chorus and orchestra of the Hungarian radio and television. A special import LP, and it's special plastic wrapper, and it's so precious. So yeah, we'll play this now, and then we'll follow on with the other side, which is the music of Paya Solo, another comic cantata from the 18th century. This is VK3SL testing, and enjoy.
vk3sl.
broadcast transmission from vk3sl.
Music of Francis Xavier Sussmayer, his cantata, Grandfather's Birthday Celebration. And we heard the children's chorus and orchestra of the Hungarian Radio and Television. Recording made in the 1950s and on the Quadaton label, Hungarian label, and distributed here by Avant-Garde Records. And that was in the collection of my uncle, who passed away yesterday, and it was his favourite record, and I dubbed it for him a few years back, and I played that in dedication to him. He was a really important formative influence on me. Encouraged me a lot with my music when I was a youngster, and in more recent years, shortly before he died, I did have the chance to catch up with him about a month ago, and I played him a Bach suite live, played him the first suite, and it was really lovely seeing him for the last time and having a few laughs. Well, what I will do now is I will do something whereby I switch off the stream, because we are going to play another episode of the Thunderbirds, and this is one of the best episodes, and I just want to play it because it's there and I'm in the mood, and I still haven't finished the dinner. So we'll have a listen to Ricochet. It's about the pirate radio station up in space, up in the space station. But we can't stream this because YouTube don't like my missions. Well, no, they do, but they don't like the anything to do with the Thunderbirds. I got a strike yesterday, first time, and I can't let that happen again. Otherwise, I'm toast. So if you're listening on the stream, dial it up yourself. Ricochet, Thunderbirds, the episode's there, and you'll know what we're all indulging in.